Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast, presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the MitsuTimes podcast. My very special guest today is Mr. Paul Fisher from Pulse Racing. How are you today, sir?
Fantastic.
Good. Paul, you're doing some incredible things down there. You've been doing them for a long time. Why don't you tell people who aren't familiar with you about yourself and Pulse Racing?
Yeah, cool. I'm Paul from Pulse Racing. We've been doing this in this business for 20 years, but I've been modifying cars for probably 35-ish kind of thing, and unfortunately showing my age. But the Subaru and Mitsubishi kind of game pretty much since about 98-ish kind of thing, something like that. And early days we only sort of got the Evo 6.5 and 6 and stuff like that before they started, really coming in at Evo 8. But we've been playing with these for quite a while, and we in different parts of the world, and we sort of do our best to kind of build some cool shit.
Yeah, and like you said, you've been doing it for a long time. The Evo platform has been the main thing, but what is it that originally attracted you to the Evo and Mitsubishi platforms to begin with?
Well, early days, to be honest, and I don't know if I can say this, the evil word on this podcast, like the Subaru market was bigger here because we used to do a lot of rally cars and stuff like that early in the day. And then obviously with that, the natural sort of almost, I guess competitor of the Subaru was the Evo. And in truth, they were a much better car to modify because you could kind of make them faster without sort of spending as much money on it. The market was pretty solid here where we were doing both Mitsubishi and Subaru. We used to run these like Mitsubishi versus Subaru track events, and they only lasted for probably 3 or 4 years because the Subaru guys started getting the shits because we would beat them considerably with reasonably sort of modified cars, but the Subarus needed to be substantially more modified. But it's just a really cool platform to modify.
Yeah, and like you said, 35 years ago, did you ever imagine that Pulse Racing would become one of Australia's best known Evo shops, thinking back to back when it started?
Without sounding too arrogant, probably yes. We kind of set out to win things. And I get a little bit single-minded focused when the competition starts. So kind of yes, where we, whatever sort of genre we enter into, I try and, have a crack at it to do, to be the best at it, to sort of, to win it and have a proper crack at it. So kind of yes. And probably back to the other question is what brought me to the Mitsubishi market when 2006, I think it was. I was working for a company here, or up until then, MRT Performance, and we were doing lots of international tuning and stuff like that. So it kind of got a little bit, heavy, I suppose, to travel and stuff like that. So I kind of decided to leave that gig, and then after sort of a short period of time, I got a job offer from the US. And it was a Mitsubishi shop. It was pretty much what sort of be known as a speed shop in the US, off the side of a Mitsubishi dealer in San Rafael, Mitsubishi. And at the time, they'd sort of opened this speed shop, and they kind of were struggling to find a tuner. So they'd gotten onto me through a company called ECU Tech, where the factory tuning of Mitsubishi and Subaru stuff. And so then, after sort of leaving MRT, I kind of got a call, and they're like, here's some plane tickets, come over and have a chat. So we sort of head over there, and that, long story short, was a whole stack of fun. But it actually, probably after 6 months, it was actually quite a difficult experience to get a visa. Not as much for me, but for my wife. So we after a period of time, we come back to Australia, and that's when sort of, through probably necessity, or Pulse Racing was, I suppose, born in. I just kept getting calls. Can you build this car for me? Can you do this? And I was kind of fairly widely known for my Subaru stuff. We had sort of won, Targa Tasmania and things like that prior. So I kind of was looking for a different car to sort of a different platform. And the Evo was kind of, the stuff that we built in the US was pretty crazy, and the market here wasn't quite there yet. I sort of liken it to the market here, back then, probably 90% of cars had, standard turbos and stuff still on them, where the stuff we were building in the US, if 10% had standard turbos. So I kind of come back to Australia with a bit of a skill set of building, big Evos. That was a natural kind of progression. So, and I'm a little bit old school in, if we're going to do something, like if I'm going to sell something to a customer, I always want to build it myself first and basically go, here's what we can sell you kind of thing, because we've already done it. So we pretty much got a very, very clean Evo 8 that was, still in factory warranty and everything. And that's pretty much my Evo still today. But kind of started then, obviously, from what we would do to a customer car. And then, I get excited and things just get out of control reasonably quickly. But that was probably the long and short of why we went down the Evo route. And the Evo 8 sort of thing was, at the time then, the Evo 9 was a new car, and I could kind of get into the Evo 8. The car looked the same, that customer was what I was trying to sort of attract, the new car customer that then wants to, modify the car. And so that was the choice with Evo, because I kind of personally am a bigger fan of the sort of Evo 5, 6, because they're a little bit lighter. But yeah, we went down the Evo 8 route just because customers would then associate with it.
Yeah, understandably so. And I thought, whenever I was doing the research on Pulse Racing and your background, I seen that trip to the U.S. and the, kind of working with the Mitsubishi dealerships. I thought that was so cool to see, because, I mean, you never hear of that anymore.
No, it was, in truth, the coolest fun. It was an odd time in America at that time, and I felt like, 4-cylinder cars were kind of like, that little bit frowned upon, and well, not frowned upon, but if you're into performance cars and you're a mechanic, you kind of went down the sort of V8 route and the LS route, and the Evo market was just a little bit So we kind of had some funny experiences when I got to the US, where it was peak kind of Fast and Furious time, and we would get some weird street racer guys and stuff like that come in, which in hindsight was super fun, because obviously we would make somebody's car go fast, and then a couple of other guys would come in because they got beat by them, and they'd need to make theirs faster, and we had these odd sort of competitions going on with customers. But it was good fun, and everybody was having fun.
Awesome. Love that. Well, back when you came back from the U.S. and Pulse Racing kind of started, what was the original vision? I know it kind of revolved around this Evo 8, but did you see like Time Attack and circuit racing as the kind of main thing, or since you came from the Subaru and a lot of rally stuff, did you think that that's kind of where it was going to go?
Probably more. Well, initially started off drag based. I sort of had the the thought pattern that if we modify the Evo and then we take it out to the drags, and then I can sort of go, okay, so this is this is the time and this is the. But then being at the drags, I kind of looked around and I went, they're not really my customers here. So I was kind of then a little bit looking at what my customers do with the cars. And at that stage, for me, and probably still today, the perfect customer is like the gentleman racer that wants to like take his car out and, have a bit of fun with it. So they were more at track days and stuff like that. And so I kind of then, I would be out at the drags, we'd be running this time, and then I'd sort of look around and nobody really cares kind of thing. That was all, the drag market here was very, rear-wheel drive sort of V8 focus and things like that. So then we sort of went into the circuit racing. And then fortunately, we're probably lucky at the time attack stuff was just starting to kick off here. Like in 2008, World Time Attack actually started as what's called Super Lap, and it was at a different track that's unfortunately no longer there, Oran Park. And so in 2008 and 2009, they run essentially the precursor to World Time Attack at Oran Park. And to be honest, the coolness, and it still attracts me today with Time Attack, is in the past I've built some really, really cool cars. But, like whether you build the coolest rally car you've got, or you build a car that you're sort of limited with class, and you do all this work and it's not that fast because you've got to build it within the rules. Whereas Time Attack is like, stick all the power in you want kind of thing, do all this, basically just, have at it kind of thing. That as a workshop, that was like, this is the coolest thing ever. We can build these monster cars and go out and race them, and you've got to put a restrictor on it, or you can only run this amount of boost, and it was like, if you can build it, here, come race. And really the only impetus is you got to be on this tire, which, if anything, makes it entertaining because the car's got too much horsepower. It sort of spins on the tire, and it's spectacular to watch. So I was sort of hooked on Time Attack from day one. I thought this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, and it's certainly so fun to see, like you said, the unlimited cars with crazy amounts of horsepower and not enough tire underneath it to make it kind of boring and stable.
Yep. Yeah.
So, Paul, what would you say separates Pulse Racing from other tuning shops?
To be honest, I think it's a build quality and I guess we take a lot of pride in what we do, and in some facets, sometimes to our own detriment. But sometimes if a customer will turn up with something that's actually like like a bucket of bolts or something like that, it's not something that we're comfortable with. Basically, just doing a little tweak on it and sending it out the door. It's kind of got to be built properly. You kind of got to. So we take a lot of pride in what we do. So as in then the customer is going to have like a reliable sort of experience, and it's I guess it's a long-term thing. Whereas I want them to come back. I always sort of say, my customers, I want you to come back for more mods, not on a tow truck. Whereas I feel like sometimes, and sometimes it is a battle with customers where they'll want you to, no, I just want you to do this kind of like, sort of rough and ready stuff, which to be honest, we don't do and kind of never have. So I think that's probably part of the reason we're still here, 20 years later, is we just want to take a lot of pride in what we do and, just build it right for people.
Yeah, I mean, when people are coming back for more mods instead of just rebuilds over and over again, you're doing something right.
Yeah. We always sort of wanted to advertise by word of mouth because I think that's the best, and it's kind of cool where sometimes we'll get people in and they'll be like, oh, I was at, a party with some people and they said, you've got to go to Pulse Racing, and they thought nothing of it. And then I'm in a different circle of friends, and somebody else says, "No, you got to go and see Pulse Racing." People have turned up in my office going, "Here I am," kind of thing. So many people are saying to come down. I'm like, that's really cool. That means we're doing something right for people, and they're enjoying what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, over all these years, has your philosophy changed? Has it always been, you're not going to put out anything but the best quality?
Probably yes and no. Like the philosophy nowadays, I suppose we probably say no to more things than we used to. I used to, and don't get me wrong, I still do. Where I'll like an interesting project will come along, and I'm like, this could be exciting, kind of thing. And you sort of get in the middle of it, and you're like, what have I done here? Why did I get involved in this? But no, we still. It's kind of the same. It's just we're probably slightly more picky nowadays, and it's probably more because we're busier than ever, and I'm always looking for that new kind of. We're always sort of looking towards the new model, like newer models to kind of like, I guess probably modify newer cars versus older cars, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, we talk on here sometimes on the podcast about when people have like the Evo 1s and 3s, and how old and decrepit the wiring is. So even if you have a good build job, you almost have to do a ground up restoration to make sure that it's a reliable build.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
So Paul, we kind of honed in on why you chose the Evo 8 as the foundation for, as the face for Pulse Racing, if you will. The current car that you have, is there anything left from the original street car that you picked up so many years ago?
I don't think so. Oddly enough, we sort of look for this, really clean example, and then no, I literally don't think there would be some parts left, but they're all modified. Like we still have, I think probably very few. The doors are the same, but we've modified them. They're still steel doors, but no, the rest of the car is actually completely changed. There's nothing left.
That's awesome. So you said you picked this car up and you kind of started into drag racing, and then super lap and onto Time Attack. At what point did this car stop being like a modified road car and become a purpose-built race car?
Probably went in two stages. I think the first stage was 2010. We were getting it ready for World Time Attack, which was the first World Time Attack at Eastern Creek, or they call it Sydney Motorsport Park now. And to be honest, the car was an absolute rocket ship. But at the time, I think it was like 450 kilowatts at the wheels, which probably in horsepower and stuff like that was a fair bunch back in that day. And we were testing at the track, and it was insanely fast to the point where the people that were running World Time Attack pretty much went, and mind you, this is a street car with just stuff on it. The people that were running World Time Attack were like, there's no real line in the sand how fast you can go. Like with drag racing, there's like a line in the sand. You go this fast, you need a roll cage and da-da. At that stage, there wasn't really a line in the sand, but they pretty much went, if you turn up and run those times with this street car, it's still got full interior and all that sort of thing, they're basically going to kick you out. And I was like, ugh. And at the time I was getting a driver to drive for me, and I thought it's one thing that if something happens and he tips the car over or something like that, if it's me and I tight-assed it and didn't put a cage in it, it's on me. But if I'm putting a driver in the car, I didn't feel comfortable with that. So pretty much at that point, literally probably 2 months out from the event, we're like, okay, well, we better put a roll cage in the thing. And back to that kind of, I don't do things by halves. It was a proper FIA spec sort of weld-in cage, which while we're there, we may as well strip weight out of it and things like that. And so then that was pretty much the all right, the car's kind of not a street car anymore. And it went on. So that year we then went on to win the open class at Time Attack. And pretty much, and we won it by probably a good 2 seconds over the rest of the field, which then, even at the event, the organizer of the event pretty much went, okay, you're moving up to pro class next year. You know, that's kind of, which was sort of the natural progression for me anyway. I kind of wanted to, you know, this was our sort of foray into it. And let's go, let's get silly. So then, pretty much after that year, then it got more bananas. We then went. That's called stage 2 of the car, and we're kind of probably the car's very similar to what it was back then, but we probably learn a bit from that. Well, we needed to learn a bit. So in 2010, it was what I'd call a fast road car with a cage in it, and then we turned it into a race car in 2011, and there was a lot of learning involved in that. Even now when I drive, because we have a Subaru that's pretty much as that car was when it was a fast road car, and you drive the two, and a fast road car, even at 5/10, kind of moves around a fair bit, but a good race car is like pretty planted until sort of 7/8. At 10/10 it's going to move around a lot, but it's a cool, fun car to drive where you can be at sort of 5, 6, 7/10, and you'll go, oh, I'd like to be over there on the track, and it will go kind of like if you've driven like an open wheeler car, it's the same sort of feeling. Whereas, you know, a fast road car, you know, it tips and moves and slides around and stuff. So yeah, it's probably 2011 was when it went bananas, and that was just into sort of tubular chassis, like cross members and, you know, tubular suspension and stuff like that, which then took a little bit of learning, because we kind of then, all the stuff that we'd learnt from pushing fast road cars didn't transfer across. We kind of had to relearn how to set up the suspension and stuff.
That's amazing. And, you know, to compare to kind of an open wheel car, that it's almost mind blowing to think of a 4-door sedan, you know, as having that much kind of control on the road.
Yeah.
So, Paul, from 2011 till now, what's the current engine combination on this car?
So we've been through a few. We started off shooting for sort of cubes and went sort of 2.4 litre, and then sort of got to the point where we couldn't, like revving it, you know, past sort of 9,000 RPM, we would start to pull pins out of pistons and stuff like that, just because the stroker combo kind of doesn't like that much piston speed and doesn't. So we sort of, a compromise is back to a sort of long rod 2.2 combo. But we've sort of honed it to the point now where it's actually a really reliable, it's probably about 900 horsepower at the engine. And it sounds really odd to say that that's reliable, but it is. And we've found that out by like then, you know, pushing 1,000, and then kind of like it becomes more fragile and it's so heat dependent and stuff like that. So we kind of brought it back to, you know, 900, and it's glorious. It'll rev all day. It doesn't have temperature issues. It's a really nice combo, and that's probably just through unfortunately just, you know, blowing it up, fixing it, working it out, what we blew up, and making it, you know, stronger. And then also to realizing that we have to have a reliable package to be able to hone out the sort of rest of the car, where we were it took a little bit to learn, where we were, you know, we're just thinking all the horsepower and then we'll go at it. But it kind of, if you can't test on it because it's such a knife edge, it came slightly smarter to sort of tone it back a little bit.
Paul, I'm just curious, why is it that you see most of the Tom Attack Evo shops running the stroker engines as opposed to the 2 liter?
Probably to be able to make more power with less revs. So if we had, so our kind of window at the moment is, or our sort of rev ceiling is probably 9 to 9.5. Whereas if we wanted to go 2 liter, we then probably have to be seeing, probably 10,500 RPM. And at that, things just fall off. Like, whenever we've gone big in revs, we start, flywheels start falling off at the end of the event, or you've got sort of rocker problems and stuff. So it becomes that compromise between sort of trying to get a bit more horsepower into it, just through sort of engine capacity, and not having to rev it as much.
Okay, that makes sense. So what are we doing for turbocharger and ECU, things like that?
So the turbocharger is a Precision 6870, which we used to run Garrett's and things like that, and we were doing some airport drag stuff, like kilometer sort of freeway or drag stuff, and so we started fiddling with Precision stuff to, like, because we need to make some more horsepower for those events. And to be honest, I was actually in love with the response of it. It just works pretty much. We were expecting to go up in turbo size, and it kind of came on the same amount, and not no real bottom end sort of. That being said, one of the big gains of being able to choose larger turbos was going to sequential gearbox. When we used to have dog box in it, kind of you sort of had to keep a smaller turbo to keep a larger sort of rev band in it. But right now with the sequential box in it, the drop between gears is about sort of 1600 revs. So the pro with that is meant we could sort of run a bigger turbo because it only has to live in a small window. And there'll be some corners where it'll sort of drop down a little bit, but it's got a pretty good, torque spread from probably 5.5 to sort of 9.5. So it can be in that rev range pretty easily. Whereas when we were H pattern, it was tougher to keep in the power band. So that made it a lot nicer to run larger turbos and, narrow the window up. Whereas if you didn't have the sequential box, you'd have to sort of, you got to compromise a little bit in smaller turbo.
Okay, understood.
As per electronics, we run Motec through the car. We started off with Blink ECU, which is fantastic ECU, but to be honest, everything we do that's serious, we run a Motec in it, mainly just for, it's no compromise. You can kind of do what you need to do. The data logging, everything is just top notch. There's nothing ever you get to the point where you go, I'd really like to do this, but I can't. You can essentially do it all. And when you start dealing with sequential boxes, the transition through gears and stuff like that, it's almost make or break. If you have a sort of a subpar ECU in it and you can't sort of drop the power and feed the power back in smoothly, you end up sort of trashing gearboxes and things just don't work properly.
Okay. Over the years, Paul, have you, we talked a lot about reliability, kind of bringing it back down from the 900 horsepower. Obviously, you've learned a lot about how to make the 4G63 make power reliable. Over the years, have you learned that it's more of like the small things, like the, fiddling with this or that, or is it more sort of the overall combination that helps the 4G63 be reliable and make power?
Probably head gasket sealing's been the biggest one. We run like a fire ring setup, like a sort of bronze fire ring setup, which that's probably the I suppose the biggest step for us, because prior to that we were running, just sort of steel gaskets, and then we experimented with wire piano rings and stuff like that, and everything was great. But then the fire ring setup means we could really sort of pound boost into it, and not have any issues. Which that's probably been the game changer for us. We've been able to sort of put boost into it, and hold it together reliably.
And Paul, when it comes to the time attack world, I feel like a lot of us in the Mitsubishi world, we're tend to be drag focused. What's kind of the biggest misconceptions that people have about building a time attack 4G63?
Probably heat management is probably the biggest thing that I find with time attack, and I think that's a lot of that comes down to, I suppose the driver and I suppose the whole package kind of thing. But sort of when I say heat management, I'm surprised now. I still see it even at time attack events where we'll have a 15-minute session. So people will go out from the gate and just run lap after lap after lap. And in truth, if the car is highly strung, you can't do that. Like literally, things will be starting to get too hot on the second lap. So at best, you can kind of like run a lap, let it cool down, maybe run another lap. But if it's really highly strung, you sort of got to work with the driver to kind of go, okay, you've got one lap, get it done. And a good driver can do that. The problem is when you're obviously learning to drive, by the third or fourth lap, the driver's coming on board, but the car's going the opposite way. Brakes and tire temps and everything's gone out the window. So you end up sort of flogging a dead horse trying to get the car by the time the driver's up. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that I see in time attack is, trying to run them too long.
This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by Revenge Performance and Transmission. Revenge is the place to get the parts and advice you need to right the wrongs in your vehicle. They partner with industry leaders in parts distribution and warehousing to get you the best possible prices and fastest shipping. With their real-time inventory on their website, if it says in stock, it's ready to ship from them or from their many national distribution partners. They have hundreds of thousands of parts on their website available. So I guarantee they can get revenge on your ride. Find out more about their products and services at revengeperformance.com.
And Paul, I think one thing that stands out to a lot of people when they look at time attack cars is the aero. When did aero become the biggest performance gain for this car?
I think here in Australia, 2012, most people probably in Mitsubishi sort of, I guess, might remember a car called Nemo. And it pretty much kind of like broke the old school way of building a time attack car. It was kind of like Andrew Brilliant's first sort of, I guess, all out time attack car. And it wasn't fast. It as far as grunt wise, it wasn't a super fast car. It just had lots of aero, and they were faster than any. Like I think to beat the field by 4 or so seconds kind of thing. And it pretty much everybody was like, wow. I think it was 2012 when Nemo hit the scene, and everybody kind of went, oh, you need aero kind of thing. That and it was a pretty cool car to see, in that it was built specifically for that, and it was I mean, it was sort of debatable where most people were like, geez, that's ugly. And because it had crap hanging off it everywhere. But there was no, it worked. It was pretty clear to see. Where we sort of, World Time Attack is turn one is high speed, 90-degree corner. And, a fast car puts it through there at, probably 170 kilometers an hour. That thing was going through at like 200, or I think it was 200 plus through turn one, and you're like, that's impressive. It hadn't been done before, so it kind of here. Nemo probably broke Time Attack, and then we were all sort of chasing from then on.
Yeah, I mean that car was almost like where canards became popular on Evos at the time, because that car was full of canards.
Yeah. It was pretty wild.
So, Paul, in your experience, how much lap time has Aero been worth compared to spending money on engine upgrades?
It probably needs both, and the unfortunate reason why is because as soon as you start sticking the aero in, it starts slowing the car down. So for the aero to work, you've got to push through the wind, I suppose. It's like you almost need the fast engine first, and then you stick the aero on. And in truth, the aero, we kind of hit the brakes on the aero on our car for several reasons. Where Time Attack initially for us was what we could, a representation of our business. We would build the car, and it's like the win on Sunday, sell on Monday kind of deal. Where we would run an event, and literally, after the event, if we did well, it was almost like the phones would ring heavier, like on the next week, and we're like, oh, okay, this is kind of an effective form of advertising. And then it like literally we would get customers going, build me that kind of car. But then as soon as the cars got more and more aero, the customer base at Time Attack kind of changed, where it changed. And I sort of liken it a little bit to early days. You would go to the track and you'd go, that is a really cool car. I've got one of them. I might build it into that. To then when they turned into such like wings, and it's almost like going to a Formula. You don't go to a Formula One race and come away going, wow, I'd like to build one of them. It's that sort of far away from what the average person. And be it's sort of coming back there. They're starting to sort of bring in lower classes that they call tuner class. And the original vibe is starting to come back, where we're sort of getting our customers anyway starting to look and going, oh, well, that's something that I could do. I kind of like it. Whereas it just got a little bit nuts for a period of time. And that, and coupled with we were sort of stuck with running a Advan AO50 tire, which is, it's a treaded tire. And essentially to this day, the fastest that the Evo has gone, I think it was probably about 2016 or 17 or whatever it was, it ran a minute 29, and that on that run, a new set of tires were blistered after one run. And so this was sort of we started seeing lots of tires blow and stuff like that, where literally the aero loads for the AO50 tire were just too much. And at sort of our point, we're a little bit kind of, still budget focused, where we would go to the event with 2 or tops 3 sets of new tires, whereas like the big teams were putting on a new set of tires every time it went out, which it just, we sort of don't have that budget. So it started getting to the point where the car needed more aero, but I'm sort of like, we're kind of at the point where the tires can't handle it anyway. So we sort of pumped the brakes on the aero, even though I did get Andrew Brilliant involved, and we designed some aero and stuff in it, but then kind of never actually still to this day haven't built it. For that and probably several other reasons, I then, found out how much it is to build carbon stuff and, had a bit of a heart attack at that.
Yeah, that stuff gets really crazy really fast.
Yes.
Well, Paul, when people who aren't in the time attack world, they're looking at the Pulse Racing Evo, and they, what's kind of the biggest misconception about the aero development? When obviously drag guys, we just want a drag wing or a bumper shutters, stuff like that.
Probably the minor things, and I think also too. Probably the biggest thing with aero, I think that people miss is the balance, where you can. It's very, very well. It's quite easy to get rear aero. Just put a big wing on it and crank some angle on it, and it's party time. The hardest part is actually front aero, because front aero is essentially the undercar, the splitter, and essentially the way that the air moves under the car. And it's hard to get that balance right to the point where a lot of the time you're sort of compromised at the front, but you have to sort of dial the rear of the car back, because otherwise I sort of liken it to, if you have all the rear aero in the world, the car just essentially wants to squat the rear and do wheelies, and you'll push on high-speed corners. You'll understeer the car. So that's the biggest thing is probably been getting front aero, and then probably all the minor little things that will actually work. So we have suspension height sensors on the car. So we'll do testing and we'll just put like a slight little lip on the outside of the rear guards to sort of pull a little bit more air out and stuff like that. And then we can actually see how effective these small little things are. But it's all in the sort of hunt to try and get, front aero, because the rear we can just stick some more angle in and it's good to go. But yeah, the biggest and probably hardest part is getting front aero.
Very interesting. Okay.
Would be the load that actually goes through some of these wings as well. It's quite surprising, the load that actually, when they make proper aero, how much force and, some of the, wing supports and stuff like that. We've literally we've been putting a Voltex wing on a GR86 recently, and it come with these like fiberglass sort of brackets that mounted on the boot. And I'm like, this is not going to work. Like literally, so we've had to build sort of new supports and stuff like that, because they will actually put a lot of, and if they're going to work, you basically need to be able to stand on the thing and, once jump up and down on it. It's surprising how much force will go through things, and front splitters and stuff. We've had to build cages and stuff like that under the car, because you kind of, for it to work, you've got to be able to stand on the splitter and essentially jump up and down and move the suspension up and down with the car. That's probably been the biggest learning experience that I see people sort of go wrong with, where if the splitter's dragging on the ground, you're not getting air under the car and it's not working.
Yeah, and far too often you see videos of the splitter kind of flapping in the wind as, it's going around the track.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, Paul, I think it's no secret that suspension is a big deal when it comes to World Time Attack. How much testing goes into your suspension setup before it gets to race day?
Quite a bit, I suppose, up until the point where we're at now. We're actually pretty. It's got a pretty good setup in it now, where we'll essentially, depending on the track that we run at, we'll either just change some spring rates and sort of change our damper settings. That's about it now. There was a little bit to get to that point. We've got sort of really nice Öhlins suspension in the car, which actually the guy that I worked with when I was at SRM over there in the US, Bo, he still works for PSI, the Öhlins dealer over there. So he sort of hooked me up with some really good Öhlins And yeah, the good suspension is priceless. It's probably one of those things where we get asked quite often, what's important, and I kind of had to even do this where when you're building the car, it's the sort of, you got to grab the low hanging fruit kind of thing where you're going to spend your money, and suspension was certainly one of those things where I'd had sort of nice like road car suspension or like performance suspension like teens and stuff in it, and then you put Olins in it and you're just like, okay, this is why they cost a lot of money. They're just, it's adjustability, but they work. Like the drivers will get out of the car and just go, wow, like that's, you can feel the difference of quality.
Wow, obviously we knew that suspension's a big deal, but it's crazy that even the I guess more name brand stuff, it makes such a big difference.
Yeah, it definitely does, and that's probably somewhere where I was looking, building the car. I was looking, to, as an example, we're getting weight out of the car, and I'm like, okay, so you can put carbon doors in it for $5,000 or $10,000 kind of thing, or my deal was, I've got metal ones in there. We'll just chop them up and make them as light as we can, and save that money for the suspension. And I think that was a much wiser thing where I see a lot of people will have the carbon doors on the car, but then have cheaper shocks in the car, and that's sort of that's not going to work so well.
Yeah, I watch a lot of the grid life here in the U.S., and sometimes I feel like I'll see just the Evos or other comparable all-wheel drive cars just kind of bouncing around the track and not really be planted. So I wonder if that's what's making the difference.
I would say yes.
So Paul, it appeared that you were big on data and looking at data and analyzing the data. When it comes to your suspension setup, do you do more feedback from the data or more from the driver input, or from the seat of your pants?
That's probably very driver dependent. So some drivers are very I guess pretty much, and again, it depends on the driver. We've had sort of all different types of drivers, where some drivers are just fast and they'll drive around anything. There'll be any problems, and pretty much you've almost got to drag out of them. Okay, so here's where we're at. How do we go faster? And then you'll get the other driver that'll kind of be like, forever complaining about stuff and this and that and da-da. But it's all in complaining about, and which obviously, depending on how far along you are in the development, some are good, some are bad. But you kind of almost want the driver to want for more, where if the driver gets out and goes, yep, no, it's all good. And then you kind of go, but we're not as fast as we need to be. Then you're sort of screwed. Whereas if you have the driver get out and say, all right, so it needs this and this. And then a lot of it, then you'll sort of go back and forth, and I'd probably say 50-50 driver to data. We had one just recently with a different car, BRZ, where the driver was telling me that it was, it was very tail happy and things like that. So I was like, okay, cool. We'll put some, more traction control in it and stuff like that at that point. And then I started looking across the data, and then I realized that it's actually tail happy before he gets on the throttle. But from the driver feedback, it was just tail happy on the throttle. But the car had actually sort of, the tail was hanging out before he even got on the throttle. So then from the data, then you can go, okay, so we don't have a traction control problem. We have a rear sway bar or, rear camber kind of problem. So you sort of have to take both on board and essentially confirm what the driver's saying in the data. And if you've got lots of data, that's probably the easier way to do it than if you sort of got to, comb through all the data looking for, if the driver says, nah, it's tip top, and you've got to then, comb through the data to go, well, hang on, that doesn't look right. That's probably a more time consuming way to do it.
You kind of need a little bit of both.
Yes.
Well, Paul, staying on the topic of data, what are the first channels that you look at or the first metrics that you look at when you analyze after a run?
First one's probably engine health. So we're looking at, because obviously if you need to well, and again, it depends on your kind of the racing that we're doing, but obviously time attack, everything's pushed pretty hard. So the first thing you'd be looking at would be, your sort of oil temps, pressure, and fuel pressure and things like that. That they're all in the window that you expect, and then obviously we track coolant pressure as well, because that will sort of give you an indication if you're starting to see sort of abnormal coolant pressure, you're sort of starting to push the head gasket a little bit. So first port of call would certainly be that engine health, because obviously if we haven't got a healthy engine, then we're putting it on a trailer of sorts. And then it would move on to sort of the driver, and then speed and throttle and brake traces and stuff like that. Where are we up or are we down, or what's going on? And then we would move on to sort of lap variances and stuff like that, where where are we faster on this last lap than we were earlier in the morning, or vice versa, and then sort of start looking for the the low hanging fruit in the variances. So why were we faster there? What did we do there? What worked? And that's sort of the order that we go through.
Okay. Kind of start with the important stuff first. Or I guess the most important stuff first.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You can't go fast and get busted.
Very true. Well, Paul, in your experience, working with your customers, what's one graph that you wish that the enthusiast, the everyday person understood better when they're looking at their data?
I'd probably almost come back to heat management again, and then the variance that's in that. It's sort of back to that heat management thing, where I would ask a customer if they run 3 or 5 laps and stuff like that, have a look. Were you getting slower? Or was the 5th lap faster than the first one? Because it very rarely is. And so then you sort of go, what are you doing? Why are you wearing out tires and stuff like that if it doesn't matter? Like if we're sort of pushing for, if it's a practice day and you're trying different things and stuff like that, but if a customer does 5 laps and they're as he gets to the 5th lap, it's getting slower and slower, you then sort of go, what are you doing? If the plan is to go fast, then don't do that.
Makes sense. Well, Paul, in your experience, have you found time out on the track just simply by reading data and making adjustments?
Yes, definitely. Certainly the time on the track through data would be, and again, it almost every driver you can kind of basically run through after the session and compare a couple of laps and kind of go, at this point you were faster, at this point on that lap you were faster, and this point at that. And yeah, good driver will take all that on and then piece most of that together on the next lap. So that's sort of something that you almost need to do at the lunch break kind of thing, and just go, okay, here's where we are, here's where you should try, and this is why this worked and this is why that didn't, and things like that. So yeah, you'll definitely find speed in that, and I suppose getting the driver to sort of understand, because it obviously most drivers still need that, even really really good ones need to actually see where they were faster throughout the lap and why.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot when I hear circuit drivers talk about using driving simulators and using the data from that to save them time on the track. So it almost feels like the same sort of thing, but you're actually out there getting the raw data and translating it into time.
Yep. And sometimes it's as simple as, on this lap you were up a gear kind of thing versus that. So it was smoother on the car, or the opposite kind of thing. Don't bother changing the gear. Stay in that gear and spin it out that little bit. If you sort of almost got to, on some tracks where, you've got to, change gear and then basically almost back off because you're at the corner, sometimes it's quicker to just drag the engine out that little bit longer. And then, or vice versa, where one corner you'll look and you'll go, you know what, this time where you went through in fourth versus third and it was faster. Keep in fourth, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paul, going back to the World Time Attack, what has been your best World Time Attack memory so far? Because obviously you've been, very successful in it.
I probably should say winning Open Class in 2010, but I don't think so. I think and obviously same deal. We won obviously just this probably about a month ago. We won Oz Time Attack, which was actually a really, really good fun event in the way it worked out. We were pretty much leading the whole event and then kind of got pipped on the last session by another car, and we had a faster time in it. We were just pretty much having to put it together, and it was kind of a bit of fun because our driver then sort of I went over the radio and we sort of just got pipped kind of thing. We're second now, and again, different drivers respond differently. Where he's a good driver, and it essentially just motivated him to push that a little bit harder. But he's still very, very focused. And he then pushed and we made up half a second, and then obviously got the win back. So it kind of made it really exciting. And in truth, I probably back to that data point, I was showing him just on the data. And the main difference between that half a second was on the previous laps, he was essentially finessing the throttle where he's kind of just easing into it. Whereas obviously he was frustrated and he was just mashing the throttle, and that the car responded well to it. It was probably one of our first events on slicks as well. So it could handle the mashing of the throttle where we hadn't, run that tire before. So we realized that there's more in it. But in truth, I think the fastest time around Eastern Creek, our 1 minute 29 was we'd been trying to crack this sort of minute 30 barrier forever, and the rest of our competitors in pro class had kind of they sort of had obviously gone considerably faster than us with aero and stuff like that. But we'd sort of gone to the event with our own goals. In obviously you got to go to the event with a sort of realistic goal of the equipment you've got and stuff like that. And so that sort of just sneaking under 1 minute 30 was our goal. And then it essentially was in the the final lap of the day, and it was the cameras are rolling, and the fact that it went 1 minute 29.0, so it was almost a 28. Was pretty much one of our most exciting moments at World Time Attack that I'll forever remember. And it still gives me chills to watch the videos now, and it still makes me smile. I still remember the day.
That's what it's all about.
It definitely is. And a lot of people ask me why I don't drive the car, and because some people have an issue with that, not so much me, with themselves kind of thing, where we initially build the car to show what we can do as a business. And it was at early events where I remember I was getting beat by cars that weren't as fast as us. Mainly just for, I build fast cars. I can drive them fast, but not as fast as they should be. And so I get a big rush out of seeing the car do everything it can do. and I'll drive the car and I just go, it's not my forte. And again, as a business, we don't sell driving skills. I sell fast cars. So we put good drivers in there to get the most out of it. And to be honest, it still gets me excited to see the car, and same, the whole team kind of thing will be on watching the car and just go, that's phenomenal that somebody can get through there and do that kind of thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. One driver's skill, or well, not really, I guess driver's skill, but it's one of those things where you can't buy, right?
No, and it's such an art. It's so cool to see when you see somebody who's just really, really good at their craft, and there's levels to this kind of deal, and you'll see like Max Verstappen or something like that, and you see even at like the upper levels, there's just different levels. But it is so amazing to see somebody get in the car and essentially wring its neck and do stuff with it we've had varying different drivers and stuff like that, where we had a guy driving for us a little while ago, Steve Glennie, who has won Targa Tasmania here several times, but he's from a rally background. And again, that turn one at Eastern Creek, I was driving it, and then he would sort of drive, and I'd be like, oh, it's quite loose through turn one. And he's like, yeah, that means you're getting up near where you should be. And I'm like, dude, we're talking like we're going through a corner at 180 kilometers an hour and the car's loose. I'm like, not overly cool with that. And he goes, yeah, that's what it should be like. I'm like, yeah, that's when you just go, you know what? These guys are awesome.
Especially when they've kind of perfected their craft, right?
Yes.
So, Paul, when a new customer comes to you and they want to build, they want to start doing time attack with their Evo, where should they spend their money first? What do you recommend?
I'd probably say a reasonable amount of power, and then suspension and brakes enough to be able to sort of use it to get their get their use out of it, and then obviously get faster and faster. And again, that sort of comes back to the driver skill, where sometimes you'll like, there's no point putting some big brake kit on it if the dude's not that fast. So you'll sort of a nice set of pads and rotors and stuff like that may be sufficient for a car if it's got good Brembos on it already. And then a mediocre amount of power, and then pretty much get it out there and drive it, and then sort of see where your limitations are, and then they'll come back to us and say, yep, it's good, but now I need more, or I need different suspension and stuff like that. But pretty much get out there and have fun with it. Kind of.
Yeah, it's one of those things where seat time is almost the best mod you can buy when you're starting out, right?
It definitely is. And also too, sometimes we'll see people are building like cars forever and not getting it done, and not like you're better off, don't go bananas on the car, build something that you can have some fun in it, and then build up to it. But building this sort of this holy grail car that then consumes so much of your time you're actually not enjoying it is not really all that fun.
Yep, and I'm sure you see it as well, Paul. I see whenever it kind of leads down that road, people tend to lose interest, and you see the part outs and everything like that.
Yeah, 100%. I'd much rather people, just run and get to a certain speed, and it's kind of cool. We've got lots of customers with varied kind of experience and varied, but you know what? They're all having fun. Like this last one where we went to Oz Time Attack, we had 4 other customers run, 4 or 5, something like that. And it was awesome to see. And in truth, I look back and I think it was probably as close to the perfect motorsport weekend as you can have, because I had, we run our car, we broke the lap record, we won, and we had 4 customers all run their cars, no breakages, everybody had a ball, and and the sun was shining for 2 days. Afterwards, we went, this was as close to a perfect motorsport weekend as you can have, and everybody had a ball and smiles and laughs and things like that. I was like, this is actually what it's about. This is good fun.
Absolutely, you beat me to it. I was going to say that's what it's all about. That's what makes it so great.
Yeah, it was. I don't want to say. Obviously, there's lots of like not great weekends that go on in motorsport. So you kind of got to appreciate the good ones when they happen. And even saying that, on that weekend, one customer had a spin, backed the car into the wall, and bent a tow hook and an exhaust tip. And I was like, wow, that's phenomenal. If you're going to back a car into a wall and that's all you're going to do, that's amazing.
Absolutely. I'd count that as a win.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Paul, what's next for Pulse Racing?
We've got World Time Attack coming up in a month and a half, I think. So a month and a half. We're on a mission with a couple of customer cars, and we've been building a new GR86 platform that we're pushing pretty hard, which we're going to have a crack at winning the tuner class. I've got 3 other customers running BRZ's 86s in that class, and then we've got another an STI that I built quite many years ago, and then sort of didn't finish the project and sort of sold it on to somebody else, and it's now complete. So we're having a crack at Club Sprint in that. So it's going to be a busy weekend. We've got that coming up, and then we've got there's a Subaru event called SubiNats here, where we're running our WRX and another gamut of BRZs and stuff like that. And I reckon that's probably going to be us for the year.
Okay. Well, with that being said, Paul, where can people find and follow you and Pulse Racing online so they can see what you're doing with, not with just with this Evo, but like you said, your fleet of other cars and customers?
Our best one's through Pulse Racing on Instagram or Facebook. We kind of post a bit there and sort of show what we've been up to and stuff like that. We update the website a little bit every now and then, but yeah, mainly Instagram and Facebook.
Very good. And Paul, at the end, I always give people a chance to give a thanks or recognize people who've helped them along the way, help get the car where it is. Is there anybody that you'd like to give a thanks or a shout out to?
It's definitely staff. Like, I got a really good bunch of guys that have been with me with quite a while, and they're all involved in the sort of mission, and obviously family, my wife and daughter that kind of put up with me being away at racetracks and stuff like that too often, and then definitely our customers, like our customers that sort of come along, and we've got some good customers that come along to the track with us, and just kind of like we try and have like a family atmosphere, where our customers are kind of part of our family. So yeah, I'll certainly say thank you to staff and customers.
Perfect. Well, Paul, I just have to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and do this. I know you're a very busy man. It was so great hearing your story and the story of Pulse Racing. So, I just can't thank you enough.
Magic. No worries. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, that'll do it for us. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.